or building up the ties and relationship that is beneficial to everyone.
True, I take that, but Russia will also have to be aware, and I'm sure it is, of the tension between India and China. And we are always going to ask the question, aren't we, Dr. Karta, that when push comes to shove, where will Russia stand? Am I right? I mean, am I putting in layman terms here? Maybe a geostrategist like you can put it better, Dr. Karta. We always, yes?
I think that's absolutely, pretty much stating it up front, like, look, where are you going to come in if there's trouble, right? But the thing is, I know Russians are very, very careful what they say about China. I've seen this often. They always say, we're all, everything is fine. It is not fine. India is not ever going to be a threat to Russia. China could be a threat to Russia tomorrow. This is also plain speaking. And if Moscow doesn't understand, then they're not the power that I thought it was, right? At the moment, there is a certain dependency. If they choose China over India at a particular point in time, well, it's worse for them. It's as simple as that. I mean, let's put this in black and white. And please also remember, we are not a third-rate power. We are one of the largest. We are coming up the ladder in terms of our economy.
Very fast.
A very much larger economy than in terms of even Russia. So there's a lot going for backing us, for getting into the Indian market, for investing in this country. And most of all, I would suggest Russian R&D needs to move into India, because that is where they're failing.
Yeah.
If they want to provide the next generation of weapons, which is their biggest exports is weapons, I mean, apart from oil, is the defense industry. You want to get going with defense industry. Right now, you're going to go towards sunset technology.
Yeah.
You want to go to the next bed, you have to come into the startup ecosystem, which is in India. So we've got the cards here, and we will never, ever be a threat to Russia. China could be. I'm saying that again.
I agree with you on that. I want to take one word from Spencer Critchley here. Spencer, hearing this conversation, does there appear to be a gap in the American understanding of global affairs in this part of the world?
Well, I think it depends on who you're talking about. As one of the earlier speakers noted, unfortunately, the average American does not spend a lot of time paying attention to international news, partly because, with a very large, powerful country like this, people tend to get kind of self-involved just as a matter of human psychology, and also because America generates such an enormous flood of news, it's hard for Americans to see above that flood. I think, though, that for Americans who are following this situation, it is important, of course, to understand that the world looks different from India as it does from any other country around the world, as it may look from the United States. And as I said in my earlier remarks, it's also important to recognize that no country, including the United States, can expect to live in a world where they only talk to people who completely agree with them and whose interests are completely aligned with them. That said, I think it's naive, actually, to try to separate the moral view of international relations from the pragmatic or realpolitik view. And I think many people who consider themselves real politicians, who try to see the world simply in terms of pragmatic national interests, end up behaving in ways that in the long run become naive. And the United States has learned that to its own bitter experience when it's struck deals with authoritarian regimes, for example, in the past, thinking that it would work to serve the larger goal of defending democracy. And in many ways, the United States is still paying for many of those arrangements, going back to the overthrow of the Shah, of the democratically elected leader of Iran many decades ago, our experience in Vietnam, Central and South America.
Yes.
And I think that's an object lesson for the world. At a certain point, for pragmatic reasons, you must stand up for certain fundamental moral values.
Yes, but
of course, you're free to choose not to, but you'll end up paying the pragmatic price.
But Spencer, I just want to add one thought to that, and before I hand back to our colleagues in Russia today, that the US also needs to realize that you are dealing with partners of matching capabilities, And,
I don't think so.
And therefore, you have converging interests. And
I think there's a reason why Russia is isolated internationally, whereas the United States has allies around the world who do not have to be coerced.
Spencer, you said that it depends on where you look at it from. I'm sure that where you're looking at it from in California, it looks like Russia is isolated. Let me tell you here, Russia is reaching out a lot, and people are reaching out to Russia as well. And
from a position of weakness because of the weakness of their
I'm giving you my
ideology,
perspective. You know, you may not agree, but let me tell you, I have neutrality and you don't. And I'll only say this, that the US needs to realize that US cannot be in competitive and adversarial relationships with all global powerhouses. And I'm saying this, I'm no great fan of the Chinese, but whether China or Russia or India, right, we are global powerhouses. And it would be in the interest of America to deal with all global powerhouses as equal partners, to keep the past behind, to forget the proxy wars of the past. The proxy wars because of which Vietnam was devastated, the proxy war in Afghanistan, which eventually led to the Taliban's victory, the proxy war in Iran, under the false pretext of weapons of mass destruction. And I think we need to start afresh, ladies and gentlemen, and I think there's a great opportunity here. Ruslan, I'll have to wrap it up and hand over to your wonderful studios in Russia today.